What is it about the word neighbor that fills us with such moral ambivalence? The age-old dilemma, love thy neighbor or drunkenly urinate on his doorstep at 3 in the morning. In the abstract, we use the word neighbor as if it refers to something more than the stranger who lives near us. It's the neighborly thing to do, we say of our good deeds, as if moral virtue bubbles forth wherever random human beings happen to eat, sleep, and shit in rough proximity. A neighbor is not a relative or a friend, but neighbors are commonly thought to inspire a warm and fuzzy camaraderie, as in Mr. Rogers' creepy invitation, "Won't you be my neighbor?" On the other hand, the word neighbor is also invested with a peculiar paranoia, as in, what will the neighbors think? I heard this a lot as a child because we had a lot to hide. It was a function of the social geometry of the suburbs. The inside of the house is for us, the outside is for them, the neighbors. The neighbors got the wash car, the mowed lawn, the friendly wave from across the street. We got the crusty unwashed dishes, the overflowing stacks of ancient newspapers, the dingy underwear strewn across the furniture. The neighbors got my father leaving for work in a 3-piece suit and tie, his face neatly shaven, his keys swinging smartly in his hand as he approached the gleaming car. We got the early morning performance of my father raging through the house in nothing but a pair of sagging jockey briefs and a single black sock, shouting violent and obscene threats against the other black sock, the missing sock, the stupid goddamn cocksucking sock, as my mother followed in his wake, hissing, "Lower your voice, the neighbors." Who were they really? The neighbors. They watched us like the eye of God, silent, patient, anonymous, ready to expose us all to scandal and ruin. They kept the primordial fury and squalor of our house sealed up tightly behind the orderly facade of lawn and car. But who exactly were they, these neighbors? I knew most of the people who lived near us. Crazy Mrs. Coogan, who collected antiques and stray cats. The compulsively neat Borowitz family, whose son actually ironed his blue jeans. The red-headed Metzger family with their ugly twin daughters. But surely these half-wits and incompetents, the subject of much derision under my roof, weren't the neighbors, that mythical entity talked about but unseen. At times, the oppressive force the neighbors exerted upon us seemed so darkly malevolent, so otherworldly, that I felt compelled to launch a formal inquiry into the matter, which is to say, I spent some time sneaking around at night, spying into people's windows, conducting investigations of the burning bag on the doorstep variety. But all I could ascertain of the secret lives of the families around us was that they ate, watched television, and raged at each other in hushed and strained voices. They lived as we did, in a private universe of shame. On weekends, they made enormous efforts to impress one another. They mowed their lawns and bragged about their children. Between fighting and lawn maintenance, when did anyone have time to get together and discuss the shortcomings of my own family? But then it came to me one day, standing by our chain link fence as my mother chatted with Mrs. Radecki, who lived next door, and the subject turned to Mrs. Coogan, who also lived next door, but on the other side of our house. In hushed tones, they systematically maligned every facet of Mrs. Coogan's existence, her cats and antiques, her delinquent son, her slutty daughter, her absent husband, her wretched taste in clothing, her fly-infested compost heap. Though I was a child, I could see that this character assassination infused my mother and Mrs. Radecki with a pleasure almost sexual. They practically rubbed their hands with glee. And I knew then what I should have known all along, that we were the neighbors, that all of us who lived on that street were the neighbors, that the only relief for the secret humiliations of family life lay in publicly heaping shame upon the other families, and that this network of furtive malice was in fact what made us a neighborhood. As soon as I came of age, I escaped to the anonymity of city life. But something of the old suburban paranoia endures within, and I find myself compulsively speculating about the lives of my neighbors. Neighbors are different in the city, though. They live in your building, you see them by the mailboxes in the hall, but you rarely exchange more than brief greetings before shuffling back into the cramped seclusion of your own apartment. There's little opportunity for gossip, and since no one knows anyone else, there's nothing to gossip about. I have moved many times, and I've had many neighbors who've occupied my thoughts. I find every neighbor as mysterious as an uncracked nut. I wonder about their enigmatic comings and goings. I wonder about the odd noises and unpleasant smells that issue from their apartments. I have lingered in the corridors, and I have pressed my ears against the walls, but I never figure anything out. Lately, I've been thinking about the pretty Chinese girl who lives in the apartment above me. Since there's no intercom system for the building, she has one of those remote control buzzers you can buy at Radio Shack. It's a little doorbell-like thing that is supposed to be attached near the entrance of the building, and when you press the button, it rings a wireless speaker upstairs. But the buzzer keeps falling off. Nearly every day, it seems, I go outside and find it lying on the sidewalk like a squashed insect. I bring it inside and set it on the mail table in the foyer. Usually by the next morning, I'll see that she stuck it back to the door frame. By the afternoon, though, I'll notice it's fallen to the ground again. On the door frame itself, I often see evidence of her attempts to fasten it securely: Scotch tape, masking tape, blotches of dried glue. Sometimes I feel a little guilty about bringing it back inside. I've wondered if she subconsciously prefers to have it lying on the ground since it winds up there so often. I try to think about the situation from her point of view. Every morning she attaches the buzzer to the door frame, and every evening she comes home to find it inside the building on the mail table. It must be very frustrating. Perhaps she doesn't know that the buzzer falls off on its own. Perhaps she thinks that someone pulls it off out of malice and then brings it inside. But she can never be sure. Does it fall off on its own, or is it being pulled off? Are her neighbors good Samaritans who nobly rescue her faulty buzzer from the sidewalk? Or are they petty vandals who find a strange delight in making her life a little more miserable? I imagine that this is why the Chinese girl is so shy when I pass her in the hall. She is in a constant state of uncertainty about the character of her neighbors. The buzzer falls off because she uses inferior materials to attach it to the door frame. She's using the wrong kind of glue. I think about buying a small bottle of super glue and leaving it on the mail table next to the buzzer. Then she would know that we, her neighbors, are good Samaritans and not the petty vandals she sometimes suspects us of being. But I don't buy the super glue because I can see where it will lead. I know the perversity of my soul. If she uses my super glue to fasten the buzzer to the frame, I know that then I will be tempted to yank it back off and lay it on the mail table in the foyer. The Chinese girl's state of uncertainty will reach a fevered pitch. She will be in a kind of agnostic purgatory in which she must doubt either the goodness of her neighbors or the power of super glue. She looks so sweet and shy in the halls that I just can't bring myself to plunge her into this kind of neurotic limbo. I guess I'm just not that kind of neighbor. Thank you.